All right, welcome to the session, make sure I'm reading in the right spot. Accessible listening, inclusive uses of sound. Nope, yes, okay. Sound in the classroom, okay. Make sure I'm reading the right intro. I've got a whole page full of them. If you're just joining us, please note that remote attendees can put their questions in the Q&A panel. The chat panel is not being moderated, so please make sure you use the Q&A panel to assure that we get to your questions following the session. Attendees here in the room, please hold your questions until the end of the session. We'll try to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to them, some presenters will be here or online from 5 to 5:30, or they will try to answer questions individually in the next few days. Today, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Charles Epley with us. Dr. Epley is an assistant teaching professor in ASU's School of Humanities, Arts, and Cultural Studies. Today, he's here to discuss when and how to accessibly use sonic media in the classroom, and we'll discuss the social and pedagogical opportunities and barriers to using sound recordings. Please welcome Dr. Epley.
Hello, thank you for that. I'm just going to test the slides. It says push hard. Green button. Okay. Yeah, so it's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Charles Epley. I use they pronouns. I'm a white person. I have a long black collared shirt, shaved head, and orange painted nails for Halloween spooky season. I'm an assistant teaching professor of interdisciplinary arts and performance, as was mentioned, in the School of Humanities, et cetera, at the West Campus. So I'm glad to be here in Tempe. Essentially, today I'll discuss how sounds tend to be used in the classroom, sometimes in ways that we don't realize, and how we can consciously design our use of sound to be inclusive, considering a couple of things. First, that not everybody hears, and two, that not everybody who does hear hears in the same way. More specifically, I want to highlight that many of us have deaf and hard of hearing students, neurodivergent students. I'm a neurodivergent instructor, and so I come from that background. Students with auditory processing disorders, and students who listen from unique cultural or social backgrounds. So how can we effectively and inclusively teach with sonic media given this diversity of demographics around hearing, which largely we can consider to be biological, although not entirely, and listening, which is largely social, again, although not entirely. So today I'll overview some strategies. I'm gonna skip this paragraph that's about me, but basically the gist is that I work in disability studies and disability arts, and am interested in the social and political impacts of media and technology. I'm also working with various research projects, including one called Proclaiming Disability Arts at the NYU Center for Disability Studies, and I work as a sound describer. So I want to begin with two questions. How often do students encounter sound in the classroom? And what forms do sonic media take in that instructional environment? The answers are often and many. So how can we make sonic information accessible to all students? Now, instructors use many different teaching methods. In-person lectures are the most conventional, but now lectures are often held virtually or recorded and accessed asynchronously. In some cases, courses are taught without any lecturing, primarily through instructional text or readings with embedded videos and audio. Across these teaching modalities, there arise situations in which sound is being used, and thus situations in which sound is either accessible or inaccessible. So our lectures include important sonic information, whether or not we realize it. And I'm not so much speaking of speech itself, i.e. the words that we say, but rather the use of media such as film, video, music, interviews, and podcasts, which have important sonic context that instructors may take for granted. I want to emphasize here that this phrase, sonic context, is actually better understood as sonic information. Information rendered audibly that can be as important as textual or spoken or visual information in our classes. So an important point here is that we may be withholding information from many of our students. Firstly, those who do not hear, And secondly, those who hear but do not do so in a normative manner. When we don't acknowledge the importance of sound in our teaching, and we don't make that information that it carries available in other formats, as some other speakers have mentioned, then this form of media becomes inaccessible. So who is left out when we expect our students to be aware of the sonic information we convey, but don't actually make it available to all students equitably? And so for those who are instructors or even students, I'd like you to take a moment, maybe I'm not gonna take a minute or whatever, but as I'm talking, just think about how you might use sound in the classroom, or if you're a student, how you've engaged with sound in the classroom. So we can think about a soundtrack to a film or a video, for example. And in addition to the spoken script, that film may include important musical or soundscape information that helps the viewer or listener to understand something important about the narrative and characters. Similarly, in a podcast about a current event, such as a war or conflict, the acoustic quality of someone's voice and the background noise of the environment in which they speak gives the listener critical spatial and social context. This information has been carefully recorded, edited, and designed by the media creator, even if it exists at a more subconscious level than linguistic content. So the instructor should pay close attention to what this acoustic information is conveying and work to ensure that the main components are shared with their students. So if you're trying to convey something specific with the sounds that you share, it is important to provide all students with equal access to that acoustic information. I'd like to propose that we can think about oral learning in a similar way to visual learning, which is to say that sound is an important medium of communication, a carrier of a message, and that we have a responsibility as educators to understand how we use it in order to share knowledge with our students. Information is lost when we don't think carefully about which components of sound we transcribe or caption, etc. So let's say, for example, that you are sharing a podcast about war, and it contains an interview with a refugee or survivor who's describing their harrowing experience with intense emotion. Their voice is wavering, perhaps they're crying. They are being recorded in an active conflict zone where the soundscape is composed of the blasts of missile strikes, whirring drones, the erratic noise of people fleeing. This information, which is crucial as interpretive context to anyone who hears it, will be omitted if it's not actively described, transcribed, or captioned. Even if the linguistic content is provided, students who are deaf, hard of hearing, or neurodivergent may be denied the same complexity of information that's being given to their classmates. This leaves them at an educational deficit that can ultimately negatively impact their success in the course. I believe that this deficit, of course, is not their own fault, but rather the result of an instructional failure produced by inaccessibility of the material. So it's crucial that we provide equal access to sonic information. So what steps can we take to ensure this inclusive approach to listening? So listening ultimately is an access issue, and I'd like to offer some examples about how to create access to this type of sonic media. I hope that these examples can inspire or guide you in your own instruction or to advocate for yourself as students in your courses. And that it can also make accessibility seem more accessible, because methods of access are often very hard to access and to understand and to use. So let's start with live and in-person lectures, such as this one. We may think that this format has very little sound involved unless you're in a music or film course, but we use sound more than we think. Whenever you show a video clip or play a piece of music or audio, important information is being conveyed. So live captioning, for example, is often, which we're using here, is often referred to as CART, right? Communication Access Real-Time Translation. Shout out CART, folks, in the corner. And it's an essential access tool for ensuring that your speech, as well as non-linguistic sounds that you may use, earlier someone laughed and it said chuckle, right, in parentheses, is being conveyed. I also want to note that students with auditory processing disorders or those who are neurodivergent benefit greatly from displayed captions. So in other words, we tend to think of this as an access tool for deaf and hard of hearing folks, but many people as well are benefiting from it. So CART comes in two forms, automated and human captioned. We have human captioned today. Human captions are preferable because they are more reliable and accessible and can be more personal. There are many CART services that you can use, such as StreamText, for example, which are automated. I would recommend that you look for local CART providers, and in fact, many ASL interpreter companies will also provide that service. And so it's important to note that these tools provide different services, right? CART is not inherently accessible to all deaf people, for example. And this was something that was mentioned earlier, but there is a distinction, right, between folks who are hard of hearing, folks who are deaf. There's a lot of complexity within those communities. And for many people who use ASL, English or written English is a second language, right? So CART is not inherently accessible to people who primarily use ASL, for example. However, I want to emphasize that AI or automated captioning is really not all that reliable. It's useful, I encourage you to use it, but there are a lot of errors that happen with that type of captioning. There are a lot of reasons for those errors that are based on how the voice recognition software is being trained, either trained on normative vocal types. So if you have a stutter or any kind of vocal impairment, it may not pick up your speech, and thus that information isn't going to be conveyed to your students, or your students' responses aren't going to be shared with others in a discussion. Also, if you're dealing with technical information in a course on psychiatry or science or arts, it may not be familiar with the phrases that you're using. So this is why, by far, it's, when possible, hire either an ASL interpreter or a live human captioner when you can. So Zoom. Many people are teaching on Zoom, either synchronously or asynchronously. Zoom thankfully has an auto caption feature. And I wanna just illustrate a few ways that you can create captions for your videos. When you use Zoom, there's an option to activate captions. If you hit the more, on the bottom right, there's a more button, and you can activate captions. And when you do that, captions appear in the live Zoom stream, but it also creates a secondary file that you can use on your Canvas, in your Canvas course pages, that when you upload a video, you can attach that caption file, an SRT or VTT file. And so Zoom will do that automatically. I'm gonna skip through a couple slides here to get to some caption information. There are a few ways to make captions. The easiest one for us might be Zoom. You can code them by hand. On the screen, you can see a screenshot of a plain text caption file, where typically there are 1 or 2 lines of text that are associated with time code information and placed in a numerical 1, 2, 3, 4 type of order. And this associates the captions with certain visual imagery as the video plays. So that's the file that is produced by Zoom when you activate that tool. However, you can open up, let's say that you forget, to activate that, that tool when you're recording, and you want to go back and add those captions, right? Oops, I forgot to turn on the captions, what do I do? There are a few options. One, you can upload your recorded video into Adobe Premiere Pro, which everyone at ASU should have access to, staff, faculty, students. And there are options, as you can see from the screenshot, that allow you to, there are 3 buttons that say transcribe sequence, create new caption track, and import captions from file. And so even if your video does not have the captions from Zoom, you can take that video, put it in Premiere, click this button, and it'll generate both a file for you to export and upload into Canvas with your video, or you can re-encode the video with those captions that are generated. There are also opportunities for you to make edits from the text that's generated by Premiere. This will be done with AI, it's automated, so there may be errors. So in order for that to be accessible, you need to go back and actually change and edit the caption text. The last way, or rather, this is a slide that says, warning, sometimes Canvas doesn't like caption files. Some of you may have encountered this if you've uploaded the caption file to either your video or to an audio file, it won't display. That's happened to me. If in the case that that happens, what you can do is simply write a sound description, right? Which is to textually describe the important sounds that are within that piece of media. So things that are aside from the speech and the text. And you can just copy and paste that as text below the media file when it's embedded in your Canvas course page. If you're really interested, you could compose a caption file yourself by opening either text editor or Notepad, either on Mac or Windows. And then if you're kind of familiar with coding, this might seem more appropriate. But there's a pretty basic schema, right, of the number, the time code, hour, minute, second, millisecond with the lines of text. And then you put those in order and you save it as an SRT file, which can be then uploaded to your video or, again, your audio file. So there are lots of options for this, a lot of services. On the screen, there are a few screenshots of companies, Veed.io, Animaker, and then a Google search that has results for private companies. I'm not advocating for any commercial purpose here. And so you can use what you want, or you can make your own files. You can use Zoom or Premiere Pro. And so the question that I'll want to end here and leave you with is, how can I use this information? I know I've just kind of thrown a lot of stuff at you. These slides will be available online, and there's also a section on how to write sound descriptions and what sound descriptions do, which you can access later. But I want to leave you with 3 points, or 3 suggestions. First, that you can consider using AI or human-composed live captions for in-person lectures. It's something that you can do, right? Whenever you do an event or have a lecture, you can use Otter.ai, you can use Zoom, right, to display the text on the screen. You can create captions for your recorded lectures and Zoom videos that are uploaded to Canvas, right? So if you're using video embeds, then before you embed it, then you can make sure that that caption information is there. And lastly, you can write sound descriptions for recorded audio, especially when that audio is central to your curriculum. For example, recall the podcast hypothetical I described, in which there's all that extra soundscape information that the hearing students or the neurotypical students may be getting and accessing and understanding, but the deaf, hard of hearing, or neurodivergent students may not be able to have access to that unless you're providing a sound description or a caption. So thank you for listening. I'm going to end here, and we have some minutes for questions, I think.
Anyone? Okay, I love the idea of using sound descriptions. Do you have any recommendations for writing good sound descriptions, very similarly to how there's recommendations for writing like good alt text descriptions?
Right, so this is something so my work in sound description comes from my work in disability arts spaces, and I'm backtracking on the slide to get some examples of sound description. Here's a sound description I wrote from a student audio clip that's a field recording of a grocery store. It says, sound description, the interior soundscape of a grocery store, rolling wheels on a hard floor, upbeat pop music playing in the background, people chattering distantly, grocery clerk announcements and beeping, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't read the whole thing. There aren't a ton of guides on sound description because it's less common than image description. And I want to point out that sound description is distinct from audio description, so don't get the terms confused. Audio description is when you use spoken speech, right, to describe visual imagery. So sound description is kind of the opposite. It's describing sounds using text, right? How you can do that is, like with alt text or image description, I would recommend that you first use kind of neutral terms, objective terms, so that the readers can form their own opinions about what those sounds mean. However, what I would say is that within some disability arts spaces, there is this idea of access artistry, which is this creative injection of subjective or intuitive description. So here is a sound description on the screen. I won't read the whole thing, but 80% of it is highlighted in yellow, which is referring to analytical tone. And then there are a few words and sentences sort of at the end that should have been in pink, which aren't, that indicate a more intuitive or subjective tone. And so that's a way for you to recognize that there is no objectivity in description, right? To acknowledge your own kind of positionality without overwhelming the goal of description, which is to provide information, right? So the balance, right, is like focusing on access. And then there are some new kind of movements toward this intuitive type of access artistry, which goes beyond those more predictive models. And that kind of relates to the conversations and limitations around ADA and that prescriptive legal top-down model of access, which we need and is crucial, but which often can be complemented by more community-based or even creative approaches.
So I just want to add really quickly, Dr. Epley, right? I would like to invite you to join our UDAC group and review what we have on there for sound descriptions on our accessibility.asu.edu website. So that information is accessible to everyone at ASU, because I think it's a beautiful addition and a necessary addition to how we think about our content and making it accessible. So.
Right, and we have captions, and captions are crucial, but sound description is a really, I think, accessible and creative way to supplement that type of access modality.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you again, Dr. Epley. That was very informative. I don't think I've ever thought about sound description, and I work in sales. I've talked about video description. We'll begin the next session. Student success requires both digital accessibility and disability inclusion in just a few moments, approximately.